I never thought it would happen, but there I was, feeling something I hadn't felt in so long. And he seemed different too. We didn't plan for it. We didn't even think about it, but the way he looked at me, I felt like I couldn't pull away. I didn't know what to do next, but at that moment, I didn't care. It wasn't supposed to go this way, but I let it happen. My name is Claire Thompson, and looking back, I have no idea why I let everything spiral out of control. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought. I'd been married to Michael for 10 years. A good man, reliable, steady, the kind of person you could count on. But there was something missing, something I couldn't name, but I could feel it every day. Michael worked long hours, often away for business, and while he was focused on his career, I was left to take care of everything at home. I loved him, I really did, but somehow that connection, that spark, faded. I felt invisible at times, like I was just another part of the routine. I'm not proud of what happened. It started as a harmless lunch with an old acquaintance, but it quickly became much more than I ever intended. And I didn't think it would destroy everything, not at first. It was a Friday afternoon when I ran into Henry Brown. He was someone I had known from college, a familiar face who I hadn't seen in years. We were never close, just casual friends who shared a few classes and mutual friends. But there he was, sitting in a coffee shop, looking just as handsome as I remembered. He smiled when he saw me, and it was one of those smiles that made me feel like I mattered. He stood up, we exchanged pleasantries, and it felt nice. He asked me how life was, how things were going with Michael. I found myself telling him about how things had become routine. I didn't mean to, but I just started talking about how distant Michael had become. Henry listened intently, and when I finished, he nodded. "You deserve more than that," he said. I was surprised. I wasn't looking for advice or pity, but there was something about the way he said it that hit me. We sat there talking for hours, about life, about love, about everything. Henry was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long while, I felt heard. He didn't judge me, and he didn't try to fix things. He just listened. It felt nice. As we parted ways, he mentioned we should do this again sometime, and I agreed. I didn't think much of it, but something about the way he said goodbye lingered. Over the next few weeks, Henry and I stayed in touch. At first, it was just simple messages, exchanging ideas about books, life, and the occasional lunch. But we began to meet more often, and the line between friendly conversations and something more began to blur. One afternoon, we decided to meet up at a park to talk. It was quiet, peaceful, just the two of us. I didn't even realize how close we had become until I found myself sitting next to him on the grass. He wasn't saying anything out of the ordinary, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made my heart beating fast. I hadn't felt like this in a long time, that excitement, that energy, the kind of feeling I used to have with Michael when we first met. But now, with Henry, it felt different. And when he reached over and touched my hand, I didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. His touch sent a shock through me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. His fingers lingered, just barely touching mine. And then, before I knew it, he leaned in. I didn't stop him. I didn't pull away. And before I could even process it, his lips were on mine. I was shocked, but at the same time, I was overwhelmed with a sense of relief. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was married, I knew that. But in that moment, it felt like I had finally woken up from a long, dull dream. The kiss was soft, gentle, but I could feel the tension building between us. It was as if everything I had been missing was right there, in his arms. When we finally pulled apart, I looked at him, and he looked back at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desire. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, it's not your fault." But I knew it was. I knew I had let him kiss me. I knew I had let things go too far. After that kiss, things between Henry and I became more intense. We didn't talk about it, not directly, but we both knew what was happening. There was an undeniable pull between us, a connection that neither of us could ignore. One evening, Henry invited me over to his apartment. We hadn't seen each other in a few days, and I found myself wanting to be near him, to feel that spark again. When I arrived, he greeted me with a warm smile, and I could tell he had been waiting for me. We started talking, just like we always did, But this time, the air between us felt different. The conversation turned to our lives, to what we wanted, and somehow the topic of relationships came up. We were both in complicated places, and before I knew it, we were sitting much closer than before. I wasn't sure how it happened, but we kissed again. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling away. It was fast, urgent, as if we were both craving something we couldn't name. And then, before I could stop myself, I felt his hands on me, gently pulling at the buttons of my shirt. I should have stopped him. I should have told him to go home, that I was married. But I didn't. I let him, and in that moment, I didn't care about anything but the way he made me feel. We ended up in his bedroom. I knew what was happening, but I couldn't stop it. And I didn't want to. It was the best moment of my entire life. Warm cuddles, nice and slow movements. I gave all of me to him. He took control and let myself fill it at the fullest. We kept kissing until he slided in me, and my world around me completely changed. I wanted to tell him that we won't do it again, but deep down in me, I was looking for more of him. We didn't do 1, 2, or 3 rounds. We kept it going, as we all craved it for a long time. In the end, my whole body was shaking. I couldn't stand. That's when I knew that I'd been missing a lot. When I woke up the next morning, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I had cheated on my husband. I had crossed a line I couldn't take back. But then I felt something else too, relief. For the first time in months, I felt alive, like something was finally exciting in my life again. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. All I could think about was how this moment had made me feel seen, heard, desired, and happiness. It wasn't just about the physical act. It was about the connection I had been missing. I left Henry's apartment in a daze, not knowing what to say to Michael. When I walked through the door at home, I found him on the couch, watching TV. He looked up, smiled, and asked about my day. I didn't know how to answer. The guilt weighed heavily on me, and all I could do was lie. "Good," I said, forcing a smile, but inside I was falling apart. A few days later, Michael came to me with a question. He had found something I hadn't expected. "I found a message on your phone," he said, his voice low, tense, "from Henry." My heart dropped. I hadn't meant for him to find out. I hadn't meant for any of this to happen. I tried to explain, tried to make it sound like it was nothing, that it was just a mistake, but Michael wasn't buying it. He looked at me, hurt in his eyes, and asked, "Is this how you really feel about me?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what to say. The days that followed were a blur of guilt, confusion, and regret. Michael barely spoke to me after that confrontation. The hurt in his eyes was more than I could bear. Every time I looked at him, it felt like I was betraying him all over again. I knew I had crossed a line, but I didn't know how to fix it. I had broken his trust in a way that couldn't be undone. He became distant, more so than ever. He'd come home, sit at the kitchen table, and barely look at me. I tried to apologize, tried to explain that it wasn't his fault, that I was the one who messed up. But he just nodded, as though he'd heard it all before. One evening I asked him, "Are we going to talk about this, about what happened?" He didn't look up from his book. "There's nothing to say, Claire, you've already said it all." His voice was flat, emotionless, and it tore me apart. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. Michael wasn't yelling, wasn't angry, he was simply numb. It was the worst thing I could imagine. A person can live with anger, you can live with a fight, but when someone looks at you like they don't even care anymore, that hurts in a way I can't describe. I knew I had to make things right, I had to fix this somehow, but I didn't know how. Then, just when I thought I couldn't feel worse, I received a text from Henry. He had been quiet for the past few days after everything happened. I hadn't seen him since that night at his apartment, and I had been avoiding him. But I couldn't help myself. I opened the message. "I think we need to talk," it said. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I didn't want to talk to him, not right now. I had enough on my plate with Michael. But there was something pulling me toward Henry, something I couldn't ignore. I debated for hours, pacing around the house, wondering if I should respond. Eventually, I called him. I knew I had to. There were things left unsaid, things that had been hanging in the air ever since that night. He answered on the first ring. "Claire?" "Yeah, I got your message," I said, my voice shaky. "Can we meet?" he asked. "I think we should talk in person." I didn't want to, but I needed closure. I needed to understand why I had done what I did and why it felt so complicated. I agreed to meet him at a quiet park. When I arrived, Henry was already there, sitting on a bench, looking lost in thought. He stood up when he saw me, and I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes softened when they met mine. I had seen that look before, the same one I'd seen in his eyes that first day we met. "Hey," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "Hey," I replied, not sure what to say. We sat down on the bench, and for a long time neither of us spoke. We just sat there, the silence stretching between us like an invisible wall. Finally, Henry broke it. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at me with those same eyes that had drawn me in from the start. "I shouldn't have pushed you. I should have known better." I shook my head, not able to look at him. "No, Henry, I let it happen. It was my choice too. I knew what I was doing." We both sat there, both of us carrying the weight of what had happened. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about something deeper, something I didn't fully understand myself. "I never meant to hurt you, Claire," Henry said, his voice full of guilt. "But I also can't pretend like it didn't mean anything. I know it was wrong, but I feel like I've lost something too." I didn't know how to respond. How could I? I had hurt Michael, I had hurt Henry, and I had hurt myself in ways I wasn't sure I could heal from. That night, I came home late. Michael was already in bed, and I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at him. He was lying there, his back turned to me, his body still as a rock. I couldn't even remember the last time we had spoken to each other like we used to. I had no idea how to fix this. Everything felt like it was falling apart, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff and about to fall. I finally climbed into bed next to him, careful not to disturb him. I just needed to be near him, even if he wasn't talking to me, even if things were never going to be the same. But as I lay there, I heard him speak. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear. "I know it wasn't just a mistake," he said. My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "You didn't just slip up, Claire. This wasn't a one-time thing. It's not just about that kiss. I can tell. I know you." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was right. It wasn't just the kiss. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that had built up before. It was the way I had been feeling for so long, the way I felt invisible, the way I felt neglected. But I couldn't admit that. I couldn't say it out loud. "I'm sorry," I said it slowly, not knowing what else to say. "I'm so sorry." Michael didn't respond. He just lay there, his back still turned to me, and I wondered if we'd ever find our way back. The days turned into weeks, and nothing seemed to change. Michael and I were still living in the same house, but we weren't really living, we were just existing together. There was no warmth, no affection, no connection. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether I wanted to stay in this broken marriage or walk away and see what else was out there. One evening, I sat down with Michael after dinner. I knew this was it, the conversation we'd been avoiding for weeks. "I don't know what to do anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix this." Michael looked at me, his face unreadable. "You don't have to fix anything, Claire. You've already made your choice." "No, Michael," I said, shaking my head. "I haven't. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this right."
He stood up, walking toward the door. "Then maybe we need a break."
I watched as he left the room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. Maybe we did need a break. Maybe we needed time apart to figure out what we really wanted. But I didn't know what that meant for me. I didn't know what the future held. A few weeks later, Michael and I decided to take a step back. We both needed time to think, to heal. The silence between us was unbearable, but we both knew that this wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything that had built up over time. During that time, I tried to figure out what I really wanted. I spent a lot of time reflecting, a lot of time on my own. I saw Ryan a few more times, but I realized something important. He wasn't the solution to my problems. I had been using him as a way to escape, to avoid facing the real issues in my life. And as much as I cared for him, I knew that he wasn't the answer. Eventually, Michael and I sat down together and had a real conversation about where we were, where we wanted to go. We weren't sure if we could ever go back to what we had before, but we were willing to try. We decided to rebuild our marriage, one step at a time. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but with time, patience, and a lot of hard work, we started to reconnect. It's been a year now since everything fell apart. Michael and I have learned to communicate better, to listen to each other. We're not perfect, but we're working on it. As for Henry, I haven't seen him in months. We parted ways, and I'm glad we did. I needed to focus on myself, on my marriage, and on what I really wanted. I can't change the past. I can't take back what happened. But I can learn from it, and I can move forward, one day at a time. If this story hit something in you, drop your thoughts in the comments. Just real stories, real people. And if you're curious what happened next, maybe that's another video. But in case you want more raw, honest stories like this, stick around. We're just getting started.